Let's be real. In today's world, data is everything. But what happens when your most critical data is trapped? I'm talking about millions of documents, invoices, medical records, you name it. Well, today, we're putting two tech giants head-to-head to see how they solve this massive problem. Amazon Textract versus Azure Document Intelligence. Let's get into it. To really get a sense of how big this challenge is, just look at healthcare. It's an absolute data explosion. We're talking about nearly a third of all the data on the planet, and that's growing by a whopping 36% every single year. Just imagine the insights, the breakthroughs buried inside that mountain of information. And here's the kicker. Most of that information isn't sitting in some nice, neat database. Nope, it's locked away in unstructured documents. Think scanned forms, PDFs, patient reports. So the big question is, how do you get it out? How do we turn all that raw text into something we can actually work with? Well, that question brings us to our two contenders today. In one corner, you've got Amazon Web Services with its service Textract. And in the other corner, Microsoft Azure with Document Intelligence. And these aren't just some random tools. These are the top-tier, premier AI services from the two biggest cloud providers on the planet, built specifically for this fight. Okay, so before we get into what makes them different, it's super important to know that both of these services are incredibly powerful. They actually share a core set of features that puts them right at the top of their game. Let's take a look at their shared arsenal. What's pretty amazing is just how much these two have in common. I mean, both use seriously advanced AI to pull out not just printed text, but also handwriting. They can intelligently grab data from complex forms and tables. They're built from the ground up to scale in the cloud, and they plug right into their ecosystems, think AWS Lambda or Azure Logic apps, to automate pretty much anything. Honestly, these features are the bare minimum to even compete at this level. All right, but this is where things really start to get interesting. Because even with all those similarities, Textract and Document Intelligence are built on fundamentally different philosophies. And this is where you, as a developer or a business, will start to see which one might be the right tool for your specific job. So check this out. For the longest time, this one feature was one of the biggest, clearest differences between them. Azure always let you train a completely custom model on your own unique documents. So if you had some weird specific form, Azure was your go-to. Textract, on the other hand, traditionally didn't offer that. And this wasn't just some marketing talking point, This was a real factor for developers out in the real world. As one user on Reddit, Fred Wu, put it after doing a deep dive, Textract was basically a what you see is what you get kind of service. You got Amazon's awesome pre-trained models, but that was it. But just when you think you've got it all figured out, the whole game changes. See, AWS didn't just give up on this. Instead of just copying what Azure did, they came back with a totally unique solution of their own, one designed to give you customization without needing to build and manage a whole new model. And Amazon's answer is called custom queries. It's a completely different way of thinking about the problem. Instead of training a model on the visual layout of your document, you teach it to answer specific questions in plain English, like, what's the invoice total? Or who is the patient? You train this little thing called an adapter, which then makes Textract's main model smarter for your specific needs. It's a really flexible question and answer way to get custom results. So, how do they actually stack up in a head-to-head performance test? Well, when you look at the benchmarks for structured documents, it is an incredibly tight race. I mean, one recent study put Azure at 94% accuracy and Textract right on its heels at 92%. The takeaway here isn't who's better, it's that both are exceptionally accurate, though Azure has shown a slight edge in some of these tests. But getting the right data is just one piece of the puzzle. When you're dealing with really sensitive information, there's another factor that's absolutely crucial: security. And there is no better stress test for security and compliance than the healthcare industry, where protecting patient data is completely non-negotiable. Right. In healthcare, it's a whole different ballgame. You're not just pulling invoice numbers. You're handling what's called Protected Health Information, or PHI. This stuff is governed by super strict regulations like HIPAA in the United States. One tiny slip-up can mean massive fines and a total loss of patient trust. So how do our two titans handle this? Well, here's the bottom line for anyone in the healthcare space. Both of these services are absolutely up to the task. Both AWS and Azure have made these services HIPAA eligible. And critically, both companies will sign what's called a Business Associate Agreement, or a BAA. That's the legally binding contract you have to process PHI on their platforms. So check and check. Both platforms give you what you can think of as a multi-layered encryption shield. Your data is protected with TLS encryption while it's in transit. When it's just sitting there, it's encrypted at rest, and you can even bring and manage your own encryption keys. And to top it all off, you can use private network connections to keep your data off the public internet entirely. They take this stuff very seriously. Okay, so we've looked at the features, we've gone through the compliance checks, but what's it actually like to use these services? For that, let's turn to the folks on the front lines, the developers, and get their unfiltered opinions. And let me tell you, the feedback is intense. One developer, Flippy Flops, had a really frustrating time with Textract's API, calling the data it returns a hot mess. And this points to a common critique. The raw output can be really complex. You might have to write a bunch of extra code just to dig through all these relationships and IDs to find the one simple thing you're looking for.
But then, in the very same conversation, another user, Chukawudi, jumps in to defend the service. They say Textract's abilities are constantly surprising them, and that it can handle really tricky situations, like documents that are scanned in sideways, without breaking a sweat. It just goes to show you how different two developers' experiences can be with the exact same tool.
And over on the Azure side of the fence, you see a lot of praise for its developer experience. This user, Deadpoka, points out how easy it was to integrate, especially for teams that are already in that Microsoft world using the .NET SDK. And they give a thumbs up to the quality of the latest models, too.
So after all that, where do we land? We've seen their shared strengths, their different philosophies, and the real-world feedback from developers. It's pretty clear that there's no single best service for everybody. It's all about choosing the right Titan for your specific battle.
So look, this is less about which service is better and more about which philosophy fits your project. If you're looking for a powerful, out-of-the-box solution that you can fine-tune with simple natural language questions, then Amazon Textract is probably your best bet, especially if you're already living in the AWS world. But if you need a flexible toolkit to build a completely custom model from scratch with a whole visual studio to label your documents, well, that's the power of Azure Documents Intelligence.
And the impact of choosing the right tool here is just massive. I mean, look at this number. A fintech company called Biz2Credit reported an 80% reduction in manual data entry after they implemented Amazon Textract. That's not just a small improvement, that's a complete transformation of how they work. And that leaves us with one final big question. As this AI technology keeps evolving at a crazy pace, what's going to define the winner? Will it be the service that has the most powerful, know-it-all general model, kind of like Textract's approach? Or will it be the one that gives developers the sharpest, most flexible tools to build their own custom solutions, like Azure? The answer to that is probably going to shape how all of us interact with information for years to come.